Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 25, verse 29. Chapter 25, verse 29. We were talking about this yesterday. We said first of all, the very interesting halacha that a person has the right with land in Israel if they sold it to redeem the land, to insist that the purchaser sell it back to them as I was asked yesterday, at the price at which they originally bought it. But that's a general right that a person has. If they don't do that, then the Yovel, in the Jubilee year, the land goes back to the family that originally owned the land. So that's a way, presumably, for the person to get it back as well. But that's for regular land. But if it's for a residence in a city that was walled in the times of the conquering of the land of Israel, then it's different in two ways. First of all, it doesn't go back in Yovel. And second of all, the person only has a year to do the buyback. What's this all about? Ramban on Pasuk Chavtes. Excuse me. The Ishkim Kor Beis Moshav Yerchoma. Bavur Shememkar Beiso Shel Adam Kasha Be'einav Ma'od. It is very difficult for a person to sell their own home. V'yevosh mimenu be'es shim karenu. And it's embarrassing when a person does. Again, if our idea of selling a home is frequently because a person is changing jobs and moving from one community to another, or they want to live closer to their family. That's another reason. But the bottom line is that's not an embarrassing thing. But of course, if a person is selling their home because they don't have enough money, so they need to sell their home, that's a very painful thing. Torah sheyigalenu besoch hashana harishona. The Torah wants the person to have the opportunity to redeem it back, to buy it back within that first year. See, but a field is different. A home, it's a painful thing to be done with a home. It's difficult, it's painful. Okay, so we're going to give you a year to amass enough money to get it back. A field is someone's livelihood. Right? In an agricultural society, a field that's how they earn their parnasa. So that, the Torah says, it's more than just, it must be painful for the person to lose their field. It hits their pocketbook if they lose their field. How are they going to earn money for years? How's their family going to earn money down the road? So that goes back in Yovel, but not the residence. Aval habayis la'achar hayir sheshina dirasov amad shana lo yazik lo. It's a very interesting thing. It's difficult for a person to sell their residence. But after a year, you get used to it, and then it's not painful anymore. We move on. It's a fascinating thing to think about. How many times, lo aleinu, but we know that's part of life. How many times do people have circumstances? I say, how will I ever get used to this? How will I ever live this down? How will I ever? And tragically, sometimes there are situations that are fundamentally life-changing, and that difficulty stays with the person for the rest of their life. We know that. But many, many times there are things that a person can't wrap their mind around. And they say, how will I ever live with this situation? And you know what? After enough time, you just get used to it. The Ramban says that's the point here too. It's very painful for a person. But after a year, they get used to the fact that they don't have that house anymore. Kilo timat michyaso im yechlat. Again, the bottom line is that the thing about the residence doesn't have to do with their parnasa. Now, there was one other type of house which is not in this section; it's in another section. Uvatea chatzerim. It talks about the houses in courtyards. Those have the same status as the fields. Why? Asuyim l'shmiras hasados v'liosa moshav l'ovdei adama. The purpose of those residences were when people would be working in the fields or guarding the fields. This is how they would stay on top of things, right? So therefore, it should have the same halacha as the field. But this, where it's just a city in the middle of a house in the middle of a residential area, it's not about parnasa. It's just about the general pain of losing one's home. Therefore, the halacha is different. Kain, dinam, kistei haaretz, and therefore the halacha is like a field of the land. The halacha for the houses used with the fields is like the field itself. Okay, that's an interesting thing. We're now going to move on to verse 35. If your brother becomes, financially challenged, umata yado imach, and his hand becomes weak with you, so you have to help them. You have to do what you can. Vechazaktabo, you should strengthen the person. Ger v'soshav v'chai imach. Whether it be, obviously, whether it be a Jew, whether it be a convert, whether it be a non-Jew who's accepted upon himself to keep the Noachite laws, who's living in your midst, all these people, you have to try to help them. It says, verse 36, Altikach meiton neshach v'sarbis v'yaresim elokecha. Do not take from the person interest, in other words, lend them money, but don't take interest from them. V'chei achicha imach, and your brother will live with you. What is meant by that phrase, your brother will live with you? I mean, of course, that was the point of the pasuk. We're talking about someone who's experiencing financial difficulty. So we say, you're experiencing financial difficulty, everything should be good for them. You should lend them money without interest, and they should live with you. Of course, they should live with you. Ramban and pasuk lamed, v'chei achicha imach, sheyichya imach, he should live with you. V'hi mitzvahs aseh lachyoso. It is a positive mitzvah from the Torah to give the person life. Shemimena nitztavinu al pikuach nefesh ben mitzvahs aseh. That this is one of the sources in the Torah for doing whatever needs to be done to save a person's life. So this is not figuratively, put them back on their financial footing. This is, if heaven forbid a person's life is at stake, you have an imperative to save them. That's the basic shot of this phrase. But now there's another thing learned from this pasuk. We can't amru. Based on this, it was said, "V'cheyachichu imach su darash ben potirai shnayim shayim halchim b'derech." There were two people walking on the path. Ubiad echad mehem kiton shomayim, and one of them has a flask of water. Im shosehu magil yishuv, v'im shneim shosim shneim mesim. So there's enough water for one person to drink. If both people together drink, they're both going to die. So what should one do? By the way, I just want to remind everybody, if someone, heaven forbid, puts a gun to Reuven's head and says, if you don't kill Shimon, we're going to kill you, the halacha is Reuven's supposed to say, kill me if you must. I can't kill Shimon. So now we're not talking about killing Shimon, but we're talking about neglecting to give him the water that he'll die if he doesn't get the water. Darash ben potirai mutav yishnu shteyem v'yamusu v'lo yirechad b'misaso shel chaveiro. Ben potirai had a very interesting concept. He said, better that they both drink and they both die, and that it shouldn't be that one of them should see the death of the other and say, it's a shame. It's a shame. I guess if I would have given him my water, he would have lived. It's not right. So let them both drink, and if they both die, they both die. Ad Shabari Be'akiva V'limade V'chei Achicha Imach really turns the pasuk on its ear from what we originally said. Rabbi Akiva had a drasha from this pasuk. It says in the pasuk, your brother should live with you. You know what we learned from that? Chayecha kodmim l'chaye chavercha. Your life comes before your friend's life. So you have to, it's an imperative, make your friend live, help your friend to live, imach, with you. In other words, that which you're having your friend live shouldn't be in a way that takes away from your own ability to live. So Rabbi Akiva says, if there's only enough water for one of you, and you're the one with the water, drink it. Sad, but you got to do what you got to do, because your mitzvah to have the person live is with you, not instead of you. That's learned from this pasuk. Very interesting idea. Sforno says something else on the pasuk, which is probably more relevant in regular day-to-day life. Second Sforno on pasuk lamed vav v'chei achicha imach. V'zetasa, this is something you should do. Kishiyesh lekel yadcha de lichios ata ulahalvoso. This directive of lending the person money, and when you lend the person money, don't lend with ribis, is if you have the sufficient means to do so. If you have the sufficient means to lend the person money, it's a great thing to give the person life, to put them back on financial footing, but it has to be imach. And he connects it to the same idea the Ramban cited, to Amram Zal, chayecha kodmim l'chayi chavercha. that my life comes before my friend's life. So it's a very practical point. Of course, what it also does is it still has that famous drasha, that famous lesson, but it gives it a very logical place within the pasuk about loans, that I should only be lending money if I can afford the loan. If I can't afford the loan, I shouldn't be doing it. Okay, that's that. Now we're going to go on to verse 38. At the end of the psukim prohibiting interest, Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am Hashem your God. Asher Otzeisi Eschem Me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am Hashem your God, that I took you out of the land of Egypt. Loseis lochem es Eretz Canaan, to give you the land of Canaan. Lios lochem lelokim, to be for you a God, to be for both of you a God. Lochem, to all of you. Okay, it's always interesting. There are many psukim in the Torah that after the mitzvah it says, I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt to be a God for you. But it's always an interesting question, why, of all the mitzvahs that it's not said by, it's said here, what am I supposed to learn from this? So Sforno on Pasuk Lamed Ches, Lios lochem lelokim, Shia tachlis hamchuven mimenu, musag bein kulchem. The desired result of God taking us out of Egypt, that we should serve him, should be something that's attained among all of you. V'lochein roi sheyiyeh seder hamadinus bachem b'ofen shetuchlu kulchem lichios zeh im zeh. God didn't take us out of Egypt to be my God. God didn't take us out of Egypt to be your God. God took us out of Egypt to be our God. And therefore, it's imperative upon us to live in service of Hashem in a way that we all can live in service of Hashem. We need to help each other. I just want to say, the prohibition of interest is actually a very difficult thing to wrap the mind around. People ask me all the time, people are very surprised by the halacha. Imagine the following scenario. Person has money a person has money in a CD. There's a set amount of interest they're earning for the next number of years. It's set. And then a person comes and asks them, I need money for X. Could I borrow money from you? Now, realize if I take the money out of the CD to give it to the person, I'm losing. It's like I'm taking money out of my pocket. I was in a framework that I was going to be getting this interest, and now I'm giving it to him. He's not allowed to pay me that difference. That's interest also. He's not allowed, and people are very perplexed. Why should that be? I understand I shouldn't be a loan shark. I shouldn't be desperately trying to figure out how I can make a living on other people's needs. I get it. But I just want to fill in my own loss here. And this for now is an interesting thing to think about, that it's not me versus you. I have to figure out how I can live my life in service of God in a way that enhances your life at the same time. It can't enhance your life and destroy my life. That's not going to work. But it's as imperative for me to figure your life out than to figure my life out. And just something to think about. So we discussed the Ramban this morning about the different halachos involving redemption of homes and land. We discussed Ramban and Sforno regarding your brother living with you. We discussed the Sforno regarding the pasuk by interest that says God took us out of Egypt to be for us a God. I'm very sorry. I actually